Okay, I want to call this meeting to order. First item on the agenda is citizens' comments. Any citizens' comments? Okay, none. Second, presentation, preschool professional development grant related to autism early ed team.
I just wanted to just do a little introduction, and then the team will actually do their presentation, but we had the opportunity to get a grant through the Agency of Human Services, and the purpose of that grant was to improve the capacity and the quality of services for children with autism across the state. And we just finished up with the grant this June. It was a year long from September until June, and we just finished up. And we were able to get in the district over $15,000 of professional development for the teachers and the paraeducators and the staff working with kids with autism. And it was most of it, the majority of it was done embedded into the routine in the classroom. So it was learning while doing. And we have Jennifer Clarkson-Smith here today and Ann Melia, and they're two of several people who participated and were the workers that worked so diligently to learn more about autism. So they're going to do a presentation for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So in your hands, you have a 2-page document, and I thought it would be helpful to present some background information that's kind of hot off the press, the latest information about autism. Okay. All right. Here we go. That's better. So you'll see on your on your page, the first thing that I wrote down was what is autism, so you could have the latest definition of autism. And there are a couple of words that I pulled out of that definition to highlight the major points. Autism is pervasive in that it affects multiple areas of development. That means it affects language, cognition, motor, sensory, and behavior. It's developmental, and that means that it changes with every age. It looks different at different ages. It's a disorder, which means that you cannot cure it. Treatment can help it, but you never cure autism. You're born with it, and you have it for your whole life. Spectrum disorder refers to the diagnoses of classic autism, PDD-NOS, which is pervasive disorder, developmental disorder not otherwise specified, and Asperger's syndrome. So that's autism spectrum disorder is the umbrella term that includes those 3 classifications. It's important to remember that autism affects each person differently. So when we get a child in our program with autism, they may have similar characteristics. Some will be verbal, some will not be verbal, some will be active, some won't be active, and every kid looks different. And at the bottom of your sheet, a very critical point for you to remember, and something that we have really learned to respect, is if you've seen one child with autism, you've seen one child with autism. Each kid who walks through that door is a different picture with a different set of issues that we take from them. We don't say, oh, autism, and have some idea of what's going to happen. We really look at that individual child for who they are. Some other important points. Oh, I forgot to set, I brought some props here. This is a visual timer. Using visual supports for kids with autism is a really helpful strategy, and a visual timer is a timer that, I'm going to set it for 10 minutes, sorry, it took a few minutes. That wasn't a trick, by the way. So this lets us see the time disappear. And so this is, we use this with the kids if we want them to sit at the table for a certain amount of time. Like one little guy I have, it's hard for him to sit for eating, but I let him know, okay, 10 minutes, time for lunch. And he has this near him so he can see that 10 minutes is going away, and he doesn't try to get up from the table until that is gone. So we'll watch that timer very carefully. I'm going to move this out of the way so you guys can see it too. So as I said, autism affects 4 major areas of functioning: language, communication, social skills, sensory system, and behavior. And that means that we need a team of people to help us work with the kids with autism. Anne is an occupational therapist, we have a speech therapist, and a behavior specialist that all work with us to help design programs for these kiddos at age 3 when they come through the door. We also work in the homes, which is a very important point that's not mentioned here. Anne goes to the home, I go to the home, and we try to help the parents understand how autism is affecting their child and help them design programs for them and deal with different behaviors they may be experiencing at home. So early intervention research is showing us that you can make significant improvements with early intervention, and many doctors may do the wait and see approach, but that has been found to be detrimental. You don't wait and see. If you think you see autism, you act on it. Waiting is not going to make it go away. And you need to address the challenges as early as possible so they don't become barriers to learning. If you don't address those behavior and communication and sensory problems early, they're just going to get more and more ingrained with that child, like a pattern of behavior that's harder to break. So it's important to go early. I listed at the bottom of the page the early warning signs at 12 months, things that you would be concerned about if you were a parent or a doctor. And the reason I listed those is because a lot of our 3-year-olds come in with these characteristics, and I felt they were very telling and would help you understand what it was we were learning about and what it is we do with these kiddos. Many of them have not made attempts to speak in the conventional way. They aren't pointing or greeting or grasping things like other children do. They don't respond when you call their name, so getting their attention is very difficult. They're very indifferent to people. They prefer objects to people. They have repetitive body motions like rocking and hand flapping. They may be fixated on single objects. They have a lot of sensory issues, and maybe, Anne, you could talk a little bit about that.
One of the things I look at as an OT is the motor skills, but I also look at what they're taking in through their sensory systems. And this, what happens with many of the children with autism is that they have a lot of hypersensitivities to things, so they may be hypersensitive to the sounds that are in the environment. So they might hear something blocks away that you don't hear. And by hearing that, it's distracting them from what you're trying to teach them or what you're trying to do. Or they may not be able to be in a crowded room because it's too noisy for them. They may have problems with touch so that they can't, it bothers them to be too close to other children, to be touched by other people, or they may be touching everything in the environment. So again, that affects their ability to be able to attend to a task. And we go through all the sensory systems, movement, touch, hearing, vision, and look at all the different areas and see where those sensitivities are, and then try to come up with a plan, what we call a sensory diet or sensory activities that are going to help them to be a little less defensive or sensitive to what's going on, because that's the only way we'll get their attention too.
And that really contributes to them being very hyperreactive or underreactive to their environment. So some kids may look really logy and very slow to respond, but other kids are very hyperactive and overreactive. So we have to plan for those things when we're planning a program for them. For example, one student that I have, this is my visual schedule. Here's the big visual schedule that I use when I'm in the classroom environment, but I have to have it with me at all times because visuals is their language. They often don't process the auditory language. So one little guy I have, he has a relax break that happens every hour and a half or so in his day. If he doesn't have that relax break, he gets more and more wound up, and we have more difficulties with his behavior and getting him to pay attention. But if we give him that relax break, it helps him stay regulated so he's really at the optimal state for learning. It's really important to remember that that's one of the things that kids come in with. They may have a strong resistance to change in routine. So, again, using the visual schedule, we don't have the same thing on the schedule every day. Yes, we want them to be confident and understand that we have a routine, and we do similar things, and there may be a couple days in a row where we have the same thing happening, but they need to learn to accept change in routine. So we have to teach that to them. You can't just do it and expect they're going to get it like typical kids. You have to teach them like, oh, today we're going to have lunch and then we're going to go on the playground. And so we might practice that and also use reinforcement, because this is going to be hard for them. They love the playground. So I have to think ahead about how am I going to make that okay and successful for them. So I might use reinforcers and say, well, lunch may be reinforcing for a lot of kids. They may like lunch, but we don't assume that. There are some kids who have such sensory issues that they don't like to eat really many things at all, maybe only 3 white foods, and that's it. So, I have to take all those things into consideration when I'm thinking about the day, and, we talk about it and how are we going to make it most successful for the kid to learn to accept changes in routine, because that's a big issue for them. And then they may have losses of language at that 12-month level. When you think about a typical 12-month-old, just picture a child in your head. What are they doing? They're talking, they're looking at their mom and dad, they're pointing at things, they're looking at the adult as if to say, do you see that? They're looking back at that thing and going, duh, like, what is that? What is that? That is called joint attention. It's shared enjoyment about that thing that's up in the sky. They're shifting their attention from the thing to the person that they want to share that enjoyment with. Kids with autism can't shift their attention from one thing to another easily. So again, that's something that we have to teach them how to do through really small steps. And this is something that has just been researched and is just starting to develop, is how to teach kids to shift their attention. Because think how much that 1-year-old is learning by shifting their attention, by imitating other people. It's a critical skill that kids with autism have to be taught. They can't learn it just through the natural environment. Your second page talks about the very specific activities we did with the Autism Training Grant, and I'm going to let you read those. The favorite of mine, and I think the most effective one, was number 5, where we had on-site coaching twice a month by a behavior specialist and autism specialist. Both those titles go with the same person. Her name was Margaret Fay from the Howard Center in Burlington. She's a behavior analyst and would come down and coach us. We had an assessment done of our program pre-grant, and they looked at us and kind of how we were using all the evidence-based practices and to what degree. Then Margaret came down, worked with us 2 times a month, did a lot of watching us, demonstrating, team meetings, teaching us about the evidence-based practices, and then at the end we had that assessment done again, and that was really rewarding for us because we saw the progress that we'd made in learning how to use all of the evidence-based practices. The biggest thing that Margaret wants us to remember is data. Data, data, data. So I'll show you a few things that I carry with me in my apron because this is part of my uniform for teaching. I don't go anywhere without it. You saw the importance of the schedule. I also have data collection tools here. I have what's called a motivator. This is a vibrating timer so that I can wear it. I decide if I want to take data every 5 minutes. Maybe I want to take data to see if a child is doing some self-stimulation, like maybe hand flapping or something. So I'll have this on me, or a para will have it on them. It'll vibrate at 5 minutes. You look at the child for 15 seconds. Are they doing it or aren't they doing it? Plus or minus on your paper. So you can get a count of how often that child is either doing self-stimulation or engaging in activities. So this is one tool that we have to take data, a very important thing. The other is a counter. This is just a counter. We used it this year to count how many times one little guy fell to the floor to protest that he didn't want to do what we were going to do. And we beefed up reinforcement, and we had a lot of activities that he liked to do. We really worked on his language, and his number of times he fell to the floor by the end of the year had highly reduced, and we learned how to use Excel to make graphs, so that we could show the parents and the team how much the child had improved. I heard it beep.
Me too.
Yeah.
So 2 more minutes?
Yeah, I can show you 2 more things in my apron. We also have a way to teach kids how to wait. You can see how well used this is. Waiting is a very important skill for kids to learn, and boy, no kid likes to learn how to wait. So we try to make it a fun task by giving them things to hold while they're waiting, but we use this a lot, and we practice waiting a lot. And first, it's just for a couple seconds, and then we say, good waiting, and we might give them some reinforcing thing, like the other things I have in here are, I have a balloon. This is just from today. I just pulled it off the shelf. This is my bubbles that I carry with me. One little guy really likes Thomas, so he can hold this if he sits and he waits for a little bit. I might say, good waiting, give him this. He can wait a little longer with Thomas. So I'm always thinking about what's a positive reinforcement I can use with a child to help them be successful. So I think, and the pod. Maybe you want to talk about the iPad a little bit, because this is low-tech stuff that we use, but we've also been really excited about the high-tech stuff that has come along.
Right, I found a lot of ways to use the iPad. I mean, I still do a lot of motor stuff, just, the typical way, but there are many, many apps now on the iPad that have been working really well with the kids. There are apps for learning how to write, learning how to match pictures, match shapes, do puzzles, all of these things. The reason that it works a lot is that these kids are so visual, as Jennifer was saying, that their attention will go to there and it will stay on that visual longer than it would stay on me as the adult just telling them what to do. So we kind of use it for, I don't use it all the time, but I use it also as a motivator. But the really cool thing that we've been doing with it is called video modeling, and many of the kids on the spectrum have difficulty with what's called motor planning, which means being able to look at you and imitate a motor action that you're doing. So if I'm teaching them how to use tools or hold a pen or use Play-Doh or do an obstacle course, it's difficult to hold their attention so that they are then able to imitate it. What we've been doing is I've been taking it and videoing one of the children in the classroom, one of the more typical children in the classroom, and showing the child, for example, I would take it out, I would do an obstacle course, and then I would bring it in, bring the children out who are in Jennifer's class, have them watch the video, and then have them do the obstacle course. It's amazing how much better they can do that obstacle course after watching it. So they can do, where if they were watching me, sometimes maybe they'd get one step, and I'd have to help them through the rest of the steps. There were some of the children in the classroom were able to do 3 steps in a row, which is, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but it's a really big deal. And that, again, transfers to being able to do activities in a classroom where a teacher is giving them a couple of directions. So we want to start moving on that motor planning skills. So that was a really cool, that was an evidence-based practice that Makerit showed us, and we've used it quite a bit with really good results.
The other way that we've used the iPad is we took it to an audiologist visit. So we had a child who had gone through that and not been worried about it, go through the audiologist visit and have, the hearing test with the throwing the teddy bears in the bucket. And then we showed the little guy who had never been, who couldn't explain it to, showed him the visit, and he went and he did the visit no problem. I also used it for transition to kindergarten, being able to come to screening. I showed the child, came and did a little preset about what screening was going to be like, showed the child, he was much less anxious about that. We also this year we'd like to focus on peer-mediated instruction, which you also see as an evidence-based practice, and that involves training peers how to respond to kids with autism and how to interact with them. So the first step is training the peers, and then it's having the child with autism be with their peers and slowly but surely work on turn-taking and sharing and those kinds of, and dramatic play. Kids with autism really don't get about dramatic play because they're not watching kids do that. They might be able to read, because a lot of my guys, believe it or not, at 4 are reading, but they can't play with toys like other kids play with toys. So we're going to be using the video modeling to help them learn that skill. So I know my time is way over now.
Go ahead.
Do these youngsters later on get mainstream, like in 4th, 5th grade at all? Or are they self-contained?
It depends, again, it depends on the child. Some of the kids, if they have the skills of being able to imitate other kids, very, very important task. Delay gratification, understand language. We have some key things they need to be able to do to be successful in a classroom environment. So we're always teaching those so that they can get into the regular classroom for longer and longer periods. All of them are with their peers for some of the time at the preschool level, playground, maybe lunch, doing the some motor things we do. And then we add to it as the child shows they're ready to do more and more in the classroom environment.
And what happens when they get to the middle school and high school? Is there programs for them up there too?
There, I believe, are specialists in autism at that level also. At each elementary, middle school, and high school, there are folks that have a lot of experience working with autism.
It is one of the things that Kathy Buck and I have been talking about after the early childhood team receiving so much training and these evidence-based practices. How are we now going to move and get the elementary school staff also trained in these evidence-based practices that are proven to show that kids make progress and respond to them at a degree greater than we currently are doing? And so we've been talking about what that might look like and how it might happen.
This was one of the best presentations I've seen in all the years I've been on the school board. Really, really interesting. And I think I learned so much myself, and there's so much new technology and methods coming out. Because I remember when I was teaching back in the 70s, I had kids, and they'd put them in your classroom and say, this kid's got autism. And they'd be screaming and yelling and correcting you constantly about what you're doing. And, it's really nice that you guys have such a strong background. You can really help these youngsters.
It really is a specialty.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How many
you have
students are you now providing services for?
that are
The early ed
autistic?
program itself.
No,
like-
in autistics.
Yes, yes, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
in the early ed program, kids with autism, and again, there's the spectrum. There are
Yeah.
kids who are verbal, who are able to participate in the preschool classroom with all their peers, and then there's kids who need those individualized programs away from their peers for a lot of the time. So I would say our count is 8. Maybe we both said it at the same time, but, yeah.
This year. And there
This
are more
year.
coming,
And
and there are
there's
more coming up.
6 more coming this year, transitioning in. I was just working on placements and things this morning,
So
This
that'll
is,
bring it to 14.
Yes.
with potential of 1 moving out. But remember, they're all varying degrees, but the incidence rate is, I think it's only, 1 in 8?
191.
this is an SVSU program, right? We have
Yes.
youngsters from Powell, Jasper.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, yep.
That's still,
And the numbers are climbing, as you'll see on your first sheet, they are climbing.
they actually had it, I think it was in the paper today, a thing on autism.
Dr.
Yeah.
McLaughlin wrote an article.
Big article, yeah.
Yeah, I was reading all
In the
those.
Bennington banner?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good timing.
I just.
Go ahead,
did you wanna-
Karen, you may be going to note the same thing that I was. So 2 things. The breakthroughs for some families, or at least one family that was significant for communication, just a little overview about how important that is, using some of the assistive technology, and then I think you're going to give the commendation.
I had shared with Catherine the story of the dad watching his little boy on the communication device, the and having such an emotional response to, it's an electronic device, and the response that seeing his child communicate for the first time and being able to
With a
understand.
voice,
With a
as
voice,
opposed
yeah.
to handing a picture, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful to have that
Yeah, I can
assistive
imagine.
technology and then transfer it into that.
And
Relationship.
this device, and maybe you wanted to spend a minute talking about this device.
Yeah, it's a communication-only device. The iPad has some speech apps you can put on it, but what happens is if kids have played on the iPad and played games on them, it's much more likely they're going to keep playing those games and not use the iPad for communication. So the Vantage Lite is it's just a little bit bigger than this with a little handle on the top. It has a touch screen. It has a different language than English. It's called the Unity language, and you have to push multiple buttons to get it to talk, and I was skeptical when they brought it in the first time. I'm thinking, there's no way, I could barely look and see and understand that you have to push this icon of the rainbow to get to this icon of the colors, and then you gotta push the color that it is, and then you gotta go back and push the I want red, and I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? That's too many buttons. But again, the kids can pick up on the technology so much faster. I could not believe. He said, within 3 days, I want big banana. He figured out where all those pictures were, and he was able to use the device, and I was like, okay, we need this. So we're going through the process to try to get
It's
that.
very dramatic.
I want to ask a question. You mentioned about the number that you have now, but then one of you said, but the numbers are climbing. Could you give me a little bit more information? For the reason that they're climbing, is it because we're better identifying them, or is it because there are more people with autism coming along?
It's a combination, because it is a genetic disorder. There are more people coming along with autism, and we are better at identifying it. We're also better at identifying younger children. So the pool of kids is bigger just because we can go all the way to 12 months, even sometimes 9 months. So already you can see you would get more numbers with that. But also they feel that there's some kind of environmental contributions to it. And I don't know, the Banner had an article a couple of months ago. They were talking about a study where mothers who lived close to superhighways, there was a higher incidence of autism in those families. So there's environmental toxins. They feel that people with autism don't process those toxins as well as other people, so they're affected more by them. But still, they're still researching and trying to figure it out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to share one last thing as we close. You're really fortunate to have such a dedicated, high-quality staff, and I appreciate them every day. Not only has Jen received a letter of commendation from the governor for work done with a family and their child, but we also got this incredible report on a young man from a woman that works in on the East Coast, and she talks at the end about what a pleasure it was working with the preschool team, and she said that this little guy is part of one of the best adapted preschool programs I have ever had the pleasure of visiting. It has provided him with the best possible foundation for learning and language. And that's a real compliment. And isn't that what we're all about, is really trying to help these children early so that they can be successful as they go on to their next environments. And so to have an independent, unsolicited comment was very powerful, and they should be very proud of the work that they do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Both. Thank you, Karen.
Okay, moving along, financial report, treasury report for June and July are supposed to be sent to you by email. We get them. And we have a budget status report, which was online as well. Does anybody have any questions? Again, if there's any questions on treasurer's report, you can get direct contact with the treasurer. Anything with the budget status, you get in contact with Rick. Okay, under old business, kindergarten enrollment status.
Right. We've been monitoring closely the numbers of kindergarten students that are entering the BSD schools, and we have 5 right now that need to have schools assigned. So we have 5 that will be meeting about their school placements on Tuesday coming up, and hopefully get those assignments out. So we're still watching numbers. At this point, we are not recommending that additional teacher. We're still going to hold that teacher in the wings, that position that was funded. And I'll just keep you posted on the status of that, and I'll let you know after our meeting Tuesday how those assignments, what those assignments result in for school assignments and what the numbers are.
Catherine, is the Acorns program the autistic program?
That's not the program that they work in.
No, it's a
No,
different
sep-
program.
That's a school age.
Yeah, it's the
That's
program
the
that we moved
K.
from Molly Stark
Yeah.
to
Fifth.
Benel for elementary age students. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
The Early Ed Initiative grant announcement.
I think in your packet, there was a copy of an email that I received about the
Right.
EEI grant. Remember, I was applying for $30,000. We got $29,028. The difference, the reason why we didn't get the full 30 is because I had put in indirect costs into the grant to cover indirect costs, and then we found out that it wasn't allowed. So they subtracted it from our grant. So that was a great piece of information to help. So now we have $165,000 of grant money to help with the Bennington Public Pre-K project.
Plus our 100 from the taxpayers too. we
Yes,
got.
yes, yeah.
So the other one was 300.
Is that starting this
270,
year? September?
It
That's the
is.
next item.
Right, update on preschool.
We're moving right along as fast as I physically can. We have posted on School Spring an ad for the early childhood coordinator, which was part of the SVSU budget and an approved position. I needed to reopen the postings to solicit more candidates, and it ended yesterday, and I haven't had a chance to go on today to look. So that's still in process. I've interviewed 2 people for the licensed teachers piece that we need to help with capacity, and I've met with several partners. I estimate today that we're up to about 75 4-year-olds. Now remember, our target's 98, so I gotta get, working to finish. But I have, on the 6th of August, I have appointments with 4 more partners that I'll be talking with and hoping that I'll engage, and then I have to step back and say, where are we? Where do we go from here? I am starting to worry a little bit about full capacity. I think we'll meet the 98. I'm hoping, I'm very positive that we'll meet the 98. I have been getting a lot of calls from parents, and placements are, we're going to start rubbing against the edge of having places for all. So,
And I was mentioning to Catherine there, that reading in the paper, I think it was last week, that the town is coming up with 26 housing units, Benmont Avenue and Branch Street Extension. And I remember when I was on the zoning board, you used to figure about 1.5 youngsters per unit. So that would be almost 40 youngsters, and probably some of those would be served with your
Preschoolers.
program too. So
right.
you, like you say, you probably won't have to worry too much about filling.
Yeah, it's just finding the places to place the children after you get to a point of
Oh.
exhausting all of the partners that you have available.
I see.
And then where do we go next? So I'm continuing to talk with the partners who already meet the quality standards, at the same time finding time to talk with the partners who don't, so that we can try to build capacity on one side and work with people that already meet the standards on the other.
Ken, I just wanted to say that the fact that the new housing is opening up does not necessarily mean new families coming in. You've got people that are already living in the area, moving from where they are to a better living unit. So they are not necessarily new people. In fact, you'll find out there'll be very few new families coming in. It's merely a shifting from, say, renting from one housing group to a better housing group, a better living situation.
Yeah, but someone would probably want to move into those where people vacated too.
Well,
I don't know.
anyway.
Yeah. Okay, but thank you. And Karen, you're on again with the state pilot literacy program?
I received
Did
a
you take a
phone,
vacation this summer at all?
no, Friday, I hope.
Yes, we're hoping Friday.
I hope I don't have to cancel it. I received a phone call from the state about a literacy project that they wanted to try out in the state of Vermont, and they asked if Bennington would be willing to be the pilot. And they think that we have a lot of good things going on here.
Right.
And they were very interested in the work that we did with Harvard, the pre-K to grade 3 approach to learning. Plus, they just really respect what's going on down here. So they have $30,000, $15,000 that's coming from the Department of Education, and $15,000 that's coming from the Agency of Human Services. And they're in the process of putting together a proposal of what that might look like. And they sent me a drafty draft, that's what they called it. But the purpose from their point of view, and I think you'll appreciate the purpose, is they want to enhance the knowledge and skills of the early childhood educators who are serving children birth through grade 3 to help support the children's oral language and early literacy development using strategies that are developmentally appropriate and evidence-based. What we know about young children, and Jackie and I have had a conversation about this before, is the competency of children whose parents talk with them regularly, and how literacy rich they are. And you had an experience with a little one, and it was amazing what this little one could do. And
At 18 months.
yeah. And we really have to work on increasing oral language with our youngest children, and at the same time also reading skills. So that's one of the outcomes. The other is engaging families and really getting families engaged birth through 5 to really help them understand why it's important to talk to their children, read to their children. So that's another component. And then also supporting the families to really, so not only the family's awareness, but also the family's role in working with their children and teaching their children. So that is the kind of the overarching purpose. They have a lot of goals that are outcome-based. So we wanted to keep you aware of it since they really wanted to focus on Bennington, and more to come. They hope to kickstart in September, and we're kind of working via email.
Well, it's nice to see that they think we're doing a good job.
Yeah.
And that's the segue to other. They do think we're doing a good job, and this telephone call that Karen had received from the State Department was followed more recently by another invitation to work with the Department of Education on a nationally competitive federal grant. And I want to compliment Karen, Kathy Buck, the principals, Donna McKenzie was at the meeting, Jim Law and Donna as well, for really spending time to determine whether or not we really have the capacity to meet the application deadline. And in order to be highly competitive, because as you know, these federal grants where you're directly in competition with LEAs or school districts all over the country, you really need to have your strategies well planned out in advance and be able to turn that very complicated grant around. They also have a point system to it. For example, you get more favorable points if you come from a rural area, and Bennington is not considered a rural area, no, under the federal definition. And also, there are other categories that we were not sure that we would gain the points. So we ended up, Karen, you can certainly chime in, but we ended up making the determination that we did not have the capacity to partner with the Department of Ed at this time for that grant. But I think what it has done is helped us hone in on the SVSU board goals that have just been adopted about having all students meet mathematics benchmarks by 5th grade and meet proficiency in reading at grade level by the end of grade 3. So we all know that we need to continue that work in a really focused way to get our strategies and action steps articulated and in process so that we can be poised to really work on some of these grants. And we really have the loss of a state reporting and grants person in the SU as a person has also taken away time that was spent on grant writing previously, so we would have had to hire somebody.
It was
to
a
help
hard
us.
decision because,
It
you're
was.
always looking for money to come into our community to help with literacy, and the focus was literacy. But the reality is we had less than 30 days to pull it together, and actually when we came right down to it, we realized that we
It's
had
actually
10.
3 weeks, or 10.
10 days because we had to
10 days.
start the electronic submission, and you can't pull off a major competitive federal
Yeah,
grant in that
it's
amount of
highly
time and have it
competitive.
be of a quality that would withstand. So we'll see we're hopeful maybe they'll do round 2 next year and perhaps we'll be better positioned.
Right. Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, next item, consent agenda.
I'd like to ask to be postponed, because I'd like to request an executive session.
Okay, well,
What?
For personnel, right.
for personnel.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, how about the rest of it?
Yes, you
Yeah,
could,
okay,
George,
can we
just
get the
ask
motion
that
removing the
4, 5, and
nominations?
6 be held, if you wanted. You could ask for 4, 5, and 6 to be taken off and
Yeah.
the rest of the agenda considered.
Okay. Okay, George made a motion to accept the consent agenda, less items 4, 5, and 6.
And 8.
And 8. We have a second?
Second.
Second, okay. Now, any discussion on the remaining part of the consent agenda, minutes, warrants?
I move they be approved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion in? Okay, all in favor? Okay, unanimous. Okay, it looks like the 2 committee reports, there's really no report because the food service is going to be meeting on August 16th, Thursday, and the SVSU Technology Committee will be having its first meeting in September, so, just to alert people, that's what's going on, but there's no reports. Okay, superintendent's reports on vacancies and opening day.
Right. First on vacancies, and I'll ask the principals to assist with this, but right now we have a .5 special education teacher vacancy at Bennell. We have the reading locally funded position vacant at Monument, and we have a potential of another special education vacancy at Molly Stark. So those are the ones that I am focused on. We are in the process of completing the assistant principal selection at Bennell, so that's technically still vacant.
Special education.
Did you say a PE?
Is that what you said?
You say a PE at Benno?
Just a second,
Let's
Jim.
go over.
No, not PE. 1.5 special education, one is anticipated.
Right.
So 1.5 special education with one of those, that full-time anticipated. And then the vacancy at Monument for
Okay.
reading. And then, Jim, you have another
I have a third grade
third
classroom
grade.
vacancy.
Right. That's right.
Third grade, okay.
So did-
And they're all advertised already?
We're interviewing tomorrow.
Okay, good.
You said you had a potential for the one special education that
At Molly Stark, that's part of the 1.5.
being vacant. Well,
No, being filled.
being filled,
No, being vacant.
right.
Right.
Yeah,
Just-
where's Bennell stand, right? Bennell has a spot. Is that,
A half-time position.
that's a halftime there?
Right, because we had a full-time, you're probably remembering, Paul, that we had a full-time, but we have someone coming back from leave, filling that with a half-time position.
So there's a half.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Jim.
No, that's correct.
Okay.
There's a question of the assignment, so to speak, of whether it will be a behavior-type person or whether it'll be some special education service, so that's in
The
discussion.
discussion
But
at this point.
it will be a special ed assignment for sure.
Is that gonna make, I mean, I don't know how often this happens, is it gonna make it more difficult just being a halftime, or is it gonna make it easier to fill that? And, I mean, I'm just concerned that we went how long last year there, and now we're gonna have one
Really
in
at a-
Molly, and we had how many presentations over the last 6 months about special education, and,
That's correct.
that's a big concern.
It is a critical shortage area, and it is a concern.
Is it easier to hire a full-time teacher than it is part-time?
Yes.
Usually.
Yes. There are a couple of options, however, that are being examined in the sense of people who have some part-time situations and whether they may be connected or be able to be, whether they would work for the need that we have.
is the issue still that you're not finding qualified candidates, or are you finding a lot of
Well,
candidates?
in
and then
this
that just-
case, I can tell you that the middle school has 2 special education vacancies currently that they're interviewing for, and they're actually having better success in the candidate pool than we had seen previously. So I'm hopeful. The full-time position at Molly Stark will know by the end of the week, I believe, whether that's a vacancy or not.
If we hired a full-time person, is there enough work to justify that?
Oh,
I would say yes.
I mean, that we can bill out for and stuff.
yeah.
Because I know a lot of that
believe-
stuff
I
has
believe
to be
so.
billed.
I believe so, yes.
Do we have money in the budget for it?
Well, right now, we're holding on to that vacant kindergarten position because we haven't, we don't have the student enrollments at this point. But we still want to keep that in the wings. We don't want to leverage that position quite yet because we want to make sure that we have
Well,
kindergarten covered.
there's been so many complaints that I have heard over the past year about behaviors and stuff like that. And if we can fill the position with somebody that's going to be in special ed, that's a behavior specialist, I'd go for it.
Certainly other schools have done that. We've changed the pattern at Molly Stark in order to accommodate a behavior interventionist or specialist.
And I've never, ever, before this year, heard complaints about Ben Al.
Yeah.
And
Well,
this
it's a
past
rising
year, it
problem.
has been terrible. I mean, for people talking to me
Yeah.
about
Pownell has
different
done it.
issues they've had, and our talks with our principal,
Mhm.
it might be something we want to look at.
I'll
I
just
know.
put that on the agenda.
We can get an update on the 20th about,
Sure.
the numbers for kindergarten
And if we don't
versus
need
the
it, we should
full-time.
just do the full-time special ed at Ben Al.
Well, if you're gonna hire someone half-time, that means it's gonna have the benefits anyways. And if they're
true.
making 40 and you give them 20, it would cost you about 20,000 more for full-time versus a half.
That's
So,
right, so you give them full-time.
yeah,
All right,
So the
I'll
big-
add it to the agenda
All
for
right.
the 20th.
get a real close update of the kindergarten kids.
I will. Thank you. The opening day is, for the teaching staff, is August 27th. And this year, we are planning with the Professional Development Committee, which is a newly established professional development committee with representatives from each of the school's administration and specialty areas. We are looking to involve the community more, businesses, nonprofit, government, and to have more conversations and interactions with individuals from the community, especially to help them understand our new Common Core standards, which also include 21st century learning skills, which are oriented to preparation for post-secondary education and college and workforce and career. So we're really looking forward to it, and the program should be set by your next meeting, and I can share that with you all. We're also planning a luncheon in which there'd be a keynote speaker with guests from the community joining the teaching and paraprofessional staff.
And the
It's an
students
exciting
are
thing.
September 4th?
Students are the day after Labor Day.
So the teachers are gonna use up 5 of their 9
They are.
professional days
Yep.
right away.
There'll be
That's good.
3 SU days and 2 building days, and it was done purposefully in the calendar for less disruption to the school year. And because we have a lot with Common Core coming in, we're in our second year of implementation of Common Core, and a lot of good work has been done. And as many of you know, we're already ahead of many of these supervisory unions in the state on the implementation of Common Core.
Thank you.
I also would just, I don't have an other there, but I'd just like to let you know that there will be a release of the adequate yearly progress from the NECAP scores on Monday. We will have a press release ready to go on Monday for Dawson and the Herald, for the Bennington Banner and the Herald. I will just say that many of the schools, as you know, because of Hurricane Irene and the teachers' action during the fall, that many of the testing cycles were interrupted. And so the state actually has held firm some of the status levels of the schools that didn't finish testing. So you'll see some variation because some of the schools were able to finish the testing, and then they had a further determination where other schools weren't able, and they're held in the same status that they were the previous year. So it's going to be difficult for us to make sure that we're looking at it in that context. So Kathy Marcoux working very carefully on the press release to make sure that everyone understands the difference between how schools are being looked at for the AYP, or the adequate yearly progress. So we'll put that on the next agenda as well.
Okay, thank you. Personnel, none. Policies, 6148, internet use policy. So we have a motion to warn that policy?
So moved.
Second it.
Second. Any discussion on it? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Okay, unanimous. The chair's report, couple of things. I just want to remind you, the Vermont School Board Association annual meeting is going to be held Thursday the 25th and Friday the 26th at Lake Maury. And if anybody's interested, you should call Mary Lee in the central office, and she'll be making the arrangements for the supervised reunions. Secondly, on Wednesday, September 5th, we're having the VSBA regional meetings down here. It's going to be at 5 o'clock at the CDC. And if you want to register and come, you go online at vtvsba.org, and on the right-hand side, there'll be a registration. Just click, fill your name and address in SVSU, and you'll be taken care of. Lunch is served, so they just like to have an accurate number as to who's coming, okay? And the 3 people will be coming down from Montpelier to give us a presentation, update on what went on in the legislature, and looking for things that the local board members are interested for next year's legislative session.
Ken, this is an insignificant comment, but why 5 o'clock?
Because they serve dinner.
I mean,
Because they're serving you dinner.
Yeah, they're gonna give you a meal, and it takes about 2 hours, and then they gotta get back up to Montpelier, because during the month, like in 3 weeks, they've gotta go like 3 a week. So these people are all over the state, you know, and Brattleboro, Springfield, Hartford, and
I just think it cuts down on board members. I don't know. Maybe I'm the only board member that likes to sit down with my wife and eat dinner at night. But I mean, it's crazy. The meeting's at 5. Remember this board? You remember we moved it to 7?
yeah, oh, this board here, yes,
Yeah.
this board, we never meet until 7.
If it doesn't
that's right.
bother anybody else, that's fine.
Well, they're not gonna change it.
Well, I
because
know they aren't gonna change it, and I don't plan on going.
It's,
I think he wants you to carry the message
That's
for
fine.
us.
okay,
Can you give me that date again?
what?
The date again.
Wednesday, September 5th, 5 o'clock at the CDC. All the information is right on the site.
Thank you.
Again, vtvsba.org. Okay, the other thing is that I wanted to bring your attention was I noticed in the retirement, gentleman retiring, a custodian from this building here, and we're also, he used to be at Ben L, and someone's covering there, so they're down 2 individuals, so I would hope that we'd be doing something about it soon.
Rick and I are working on something that we're gonna bring to the board at the next.
Okay.
And I would like to openly thank Butch Hebert, who was
Yes,
retired
please,
after
thank you
26 years.
very much.
That he's been with us, and I'm gonna really miss him because he's the guy that would cover anything extra that I had going on. So, and really gonna miss him, but
We're in trouble. Yeah.
he's done his due diligence. Thanks, Butch.
Tell him he said thank you.
His only problem is he's a Yankee fan.
Yeah.
Ken, I might mention too that maybe it's not on here, but the Buildings and Grounds Committee, maybe as we get a little later into August, ought to probably get together to have a follow-up, Paul, and any other
Yes,
board member that
absolutely.
wants to go on those things that we were looking at before school
Absolutely.
starts.
Absolutely.
Oh, you can see all the work they did at the monument? I mean,
Jerry,
Molly Stark and stuff like
schedule
that?
it.
Anytime you want.
No, well, we'll work around, but before school starts, let's do it.
Did you put that mural up at
Yeah.
That's Molly for the art teacher.
Okay.
Okay, and that covers everything I had. Student enrollment was in our packet,
Yes?
and now we'll go over the task list. There's not much on it.
Look at Branch Street numbers for students. Rick's gonna do that by the August 20th meeting.
Okay.
And we also have all the agenda items that I've listed, so
Okay.
we'll get those.
Anything, anybody have anything else they'd like to bring up at the meeting?
Just a
Yes,
quick
Paul?
question. What's the follow-up, or how do we generate task lists? Where do we get the feedback? You know, you thought
Usually
about
I put it in the agenda, but I noticed on this agenda, usually there's an item at the beginning of last month's task list.
You want to mention it, but if
And
you're not getting your
it has not been on the agenda for the last 2 times, so I'll make sure it is. Because usually what happens is we bring it back and we say, this was what was on the
that's it.
previous month,
Affordable housing.
and here's what's on now. Most of the time, it's inserted into the agenda items, so
Yeah.
you might not realize it was from the task list.
Oh,
But I
because
can
people
put it back
move from
on
one
the
part of town
agenda, it
to
really
another.
should be there.
Well, I'm just thinking, I mean, there's
Families coming in.
SBS reports that we were gonna put on the agenda standing, you know, and just wanna make sure that we get it in there so we,
That's right.
you know, there's
Make sure.
formal,
You're right.
feedback coming back and
He's
where we're
right.
headed as
Yep.
a
That's
as
right.
an issue.
From now on, we need a SVSU report.
Right, and they're meeting on this Thursday, tomorrow night.
Tomorrow. And the 23rd.
And the 23rd. So that's a good point. Make sure it's on the next agenda. Thank you, Paul.
I have to be there.
Okay, anything else anybody like to bring up? Okay, can we have a motion to go in executive session for personnel and a student matter?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Okay, unanimous.
Ken, I'd like to invite the principals in at the executive session, at least for the first part, and then we'll excuse them.
Sure.
Just say